At 6:42 p.m., my daughter canceled my return ticket while I was standing at gate C19 in Chicago O'Hare. At 6:44, she walked away with my phone and my wallet. The boarding screen still showed my flight to Atlanta. I watched the word confirmed disappear and change to canceled. I asked her what she was doing. She said I had embarrassed her in front of her fiancé's family. She said I could figure it out. Then she left. I was 62 years old, carrying a small blue carry-on, and wearing shoes that hurt after 10 minutes of walking. My ID was inside her purse. My medication was in my suitcase, already checked. The customer service line wrapped around a metal barrier near a coffee stand. At 6:51 p.m., I sat down on a plastic airport chair and tried to slow my breathing. I had no way to call anyone, no way to pay for a hotel. The gate agent avoided eye contact. That was when a man in a dark coat stopped in front of me. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't offer sympathy. He leaned slightly closer and said quietly, "Pretend you're my wife for the next 10 minutes. I stared at him. Then he added, without changing his expression, "Your daughter will regret this." I did not answer him immediately. The announcement for another flight echoed above us. Something about final boarding for Denver. People moved past with rolling suitcases and coffee cups. He stood still, hands in his coat pockets, not smiling. At 6:53 p.m., he repeated, 10 minutes. That's all. His voice was low, controlled, not urgent, not kind either. I asked, why? He looked past me toward the security corridor and said, because someone is about to approach you and they won't be asking politely. I turned slightly. 2 airport police officers were walking in our direction. One of them was holding a tablet. My stomach tightened. I haven't done anything. I said, I know, he replied, but your daughter just reported you. At 6:55 p.m., the officers stopped in front of me. One asked for identification. I explained that my daughter had my purse and phone. He glanced at the tablet again and asked for my name. I gave it. The officer looked uncertain. The man beside me stepped forward before I could say anything else. She's with me, he said calmly. My wife left her ID in our checked luggage. We're flying private tonight. There must be some mistake. The officer's posture shifted slightly. Sir, we received a report of a disoriented elderly woman claiming abandonment. The word elderly landed harder than anything else. The man replied, my wife is not disoriented. She's tired. We've had a long day. He placed his hand lightly at the small of my back. It wasn't affectionate. It was steady. The officer looked between us. Ma'am, are you safe? I understood what was happening then. My daughter hadn't just left me. She had preemptively labeled me unstable. I said clearly, yes, I am safe. The officer hesitated. Do you wish to press any complaint? No, I said. At 6:58 p.m., they stepped aside and spoke quietly with each other. Then they nodded and walked away. The man removed his hand. Thank you, I said. He studied my face for a moment. You don't look surprised. I'm not, I said. That wasn't entirely true. I was surprised by the police. I was not surprised by my daughter. He glanced at his watch. You can't stay here tonight. I don't have options, I said. He looked toward the terminal exit. I do. At 7:05 p.m., we were walking toward the private terminal access corridor. I asked his name. He said, Daniel. He did not ask for mine. At 7:12 p.m., a black SUV pulled up outside a side entrance marked Authorized Access Only. A driver stepped out and nodded to Daniel without speaking. Inside the vehicle, the leather seats were warm. The windows were tinted. I kept my carry-on on my lap. You don't have to trust me, he said, but you do need somewhere secure tonight. Why are you helping me? I asked. He looked forward, because I recognized the pattern. The drive took 12 minutes. At 7:24 p.m., we stopped in front of a low building separated from the main airport traffic. No crowds, no announcements, just a quiet lobby and a receptionist who greeted Daniel by name. No one questioned me. In a private room, he handed me a glass of water and asked one question. Did she take anything else besides your wallet? My medication, I said. And my ID. He nodded once and stepped outside. I could hear his voice through the door, calm but precise. He gave instructions about retrieving checked luggage and contacting someone named Marcus. At 7:36 p.m., he returned. "You'll have your suitcase within the hour," he said. "As for your daughter, she just made a serious mistake." I felt something shift in my chest, not relief exactly. Recognition. "What do you mean?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he sat across from me and placed a folder on the table. Inside were printed screenshots, security camera stills from gate C19, timestamps in the corner, 6:40 p.m. My daughter holding my purse, 6:42 p.m. Her typing on her phone, 6:44 p.m. walking away alone. He said quietly, "My company owns part of the airport's surveillance infrastructure." I looked at the images again. She had planned this. At 7:50 p.m., a staff member knocked and placed my suitcase beside me. Daniel stood. "You can stay in our guest residence tonight," he said. "Tomorrow you decide what to do." "Why?" I asked again. He paused at the doorway. "Because abandonment has consequences," he said, "and your daughter just triggered a chain of them." The guest residence was 15 minutes from the airport in a gated compound behind a medical office complex. It wasn't a mansion. It was controlled, quiet, structured. The kind of place built for privacy, not display. At 8:18 p.m., the SUV stopped in front of a small two-story building with keypad access. Daniel walked me inside and handed me a temporary card. "Second floor. Code expires at noon tomorrow," he said. He did not linger. Inside the room, there was a bed, a desk, a small kitchenette, and a folded set of fresh clothes placed on a chair. Someone had anticipated my size. At 8:27 p.m., I plugged in a loaner phone, left charging on the nightstand. My suitcase had been placed near the wall. My medication was intact. I sat down and finally allowed the silence to stretch. At 8:41 p.m., the phone buzzed. The screen showed 6 missed calls from my daughter, 12 text messages. The first read, "Why did you cause a scene?" The second, "Security is asking questions." The third, "Answer me." I did not reply. At 8:44 p.m., another message arrived. "What did you tell them?" I set the phone face down. At 9:02 p.m., Daniel called. "Your daughter's fiancé's family has connections with a local charity board," he said without greeting. "She told them you were unstable. That's why she preemptively contacted airport police." "I see," I said. "She didn't expect surveillance to contradict her." He continued, "Or witnesses." "Witnesses?" "The woman seated behind you at gate C19 filed a statement," he said. "She saw your daughter take your purse." I exhaled slowly. Daniel added, "Your daughter's fiancé's father is a public donor to one of our foundations. They are very concerned about optics." There it was. Not kindness. Not coincidence. Reputation. At 9:18 p.m., my daughter sent another message. "Please call me. This is getting out of hand." I didn't. At 9:34 p.m., Daniel texted one line, "Tomorrow at 10 a.m., private lounge." I slept lightly. The next morning at 8:12 a.m., the phone buzzed again. This time, the message was shorter. "Mom, I made a mistake." No punctuation. At 9:40 a.m., I entered the private lounge Daniel had mentioned. It overlooked a runway through thick glass. There were 3 people seated already. My daughter, her fiancé, and his father. My daughter looked smaller than she had the night before. She avoided my eyes. Daniel stood by the window. At 9:57 a.m., the fiancé's father spoke first. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding at the airport," he said. I said nothing. My daughter finally looked at me. "I thought you were going to embarrass me again," she said quietly. "By existing?" I asked. Silence. Daniel placed a folder on the table. Inside were printed incident logs, police report summary, surveillance timestamps, a written statement from the woman at gate C19. He did not speak. He didn't need to. The fiancé's father cleared his throat. "This kind of allegation can damage reputations," he said carefully. "False reports are taken seriously." My daughter's face turned pale. I didn't lie, she said quickly. I exaggerated. Daniel responded calmly. You reported abandonment and mental instability. The footage shows you removing identification and canceling a confirmed ticket. He slid another paper forward, a record of the canceled flight, time-stamped, payment method listed. Her credit card. At 10:11 a.m., she began to cry, not loudly, just enough to show pressure. Her fiancé leaned back, eyes distant. His father said, "We need to resolve this properly." That was viral lock number 1. No raised voices. No dramatic reveal. Just documents on a table. My daughter looked at me then. Mom, please, just tell them it was confusion. I folded my hands on my lap. I told the officers I was safe. I said, that was all. The room shifted. The fiancé's father nodded slowly. We will consult counsel, he said. Daniel closed the folder. At 10:18 a.m., the meeting ended. My daughter tried to approach me in the hallway. I stepped aside and walked past her. She didn't follow. Outside, Daniel asked, "How would you like to proceed?" "I'm not sure yet," I said. He nodded. "Take your time. But understand this, she initiated a formal allegation that cannot simply disappear." At 11:02 a.m., my daughter texted again. I didn't think it would go this far. I stared at the message. It already had. By Tuesday morning, the tone changed. At 8:03 a.m., I received a formal notice from airport administration requesting a written statement regarding the incident. The language was neutral. It referenced disputed passenger abandonment and conflicting accounts. At 8:17 a.m., my daughter sent a message, "Please don't respond yet. We need to align." Align. That word told me more than anything else. At 8:25 a.m., Daniel called. "Do not coordinate statements," he said calmly. "That becomes obstruction." I wasn't planning to. I replied. "Good," he said, "because this is no longer family. It's documentation." At 9:02 a.m., the fiancé's father emailed requesting a private resolution. He proposed that the airport complaint be withdrawn and that the matter be handled within the family. The email included the phrase reputational exposure twice. I forwarded it to Daniel. He responded within 4 minutes. Decline politely. Keep everything in writing. At 9:18 a.m., I sent a short reply. I will respond directly to airport administration. No emotion. No explanation. At 9:46 a.m., airport legal sent a follow-up notice indicating that false reporting could carry penalties under municipal ordinance. The email cited specific code numbers. I saved it. At 10:03 a.m., my daughter called. I let it ring. She called again at 10:05. I answered. She began speaking quickly. "Mom, they're overreacting. You know how these people are. Just say it was a misunderstanding." "You took my ID?" I said. "I was protecting you," she replied. "From what?" "You were going to make a scene." I let the silence sit. Then she said something that shifted everything. I had to show them I'm not tied to that chaos. There it was. Not embarrassment. Separation. At 10:14 a.m., I ended the call. At 11 a.m., Daniel forwarded something new. A transcript request from the police body cam footage. My daughter had told the officer I was confused and prone to emotional episodes. She had used the word unstable. That word stayed with me. At 11:32 a.m., airport administration confirmed they would review all materials before closing the file. At 1:08 p.m., my daughter emailed me. Subject line, "Please don't ruin my future." The email contained no apology, only concern about her engagement and upcoming wedding. At 2:15 p.m., the fiancé's father sent another message, this time directly to Daniel. It suggested mediation and financial goodwill in exchange for silence. Daniel replied with one sentence, "My involvement ends when the documentation ends." The boundary crossing happened that evening. At 6:40 p.m., my daughter posted on social media a carefully worded message about difficult family members and setting boundaries. She did not name me, but mutual acquaintances began messaging. At 7:12 p.m., someone forwarded me the post. At 7:20 p.m., Daniel sent me a screenshot. Archived, he wrote. At 7:28 p.m., airport legal emailed stating they had been made aware of public statements connected to the ongoing review. The timing was clear. Step 1 of viral lock number 2 had already occurred. She had made an allegation. Step 2 unfolded publicly. She framed herself as the victim before the review concluded. At 8:05 p.m., her fiancé's father called Daniel directly. I overheard only part of the conversation. This wasn't supposed to escalate. It's already documented. Damage control. At 8:22 p.m., my daughter texted me again. Delete everything. I didn't respond. At 9:10 p.m., airport administration sent a formal request asking her to clarify discrepancies between her initial report and surveillance timestamps. It was no longer about me. It was about her statement. On Wednesday at 10:45 a.m., she attempted one last shift. She emailed the airport claiming she felt pressured to exaggerate due to family stress. She attached no evidence. At 11:02 a.m., administration replied requesting confirmation under penalty of perjury. Silence followed. At 1:15 p.m., Daniel forwarded me a final document, a summary report draft noting inconsistencies in her account and referencing potential referral to municipal review. He added one line. This concludes step 2. I understood. She had created the allegation. She had amplified it publicly. Now she was contradicting it formally. The loop was closing. At 3:30 p.m., I took a walk outside the residence compound. The sky was gray. Planes lifted off in the distance. I checked the time, out of habit. 4:02 p.m. My daughter had not texted again. For the first time since gate C19, the pressure shifted entirely away from me. The review did not end with drama. It ended with paperwork. On Thursday at 9:06 a.m., airport administration issued a preliminary findings notice. It listed 3 discrepancies between my daughter's report and surveillance records. Each discrepancy included timestamps and officer body cam references. At 9:22 a.m., her fiancé's father called Daniel again. This time his voice carried less authority. Daniel kept the call brief. They are evaluating municipal referral, Daniel told me after hanging up. False reporting can trigger fines. At 10:14 a.m., my daughter emailed administration requesting to amend her statement. The amendment removed the word unstable. It claimed emotional stress. At 10:47 a.m., administration replied that amendments would be added to the record but would not erase original language. Step 3 completed itself. She had initiated the claim. She had reinforced it publicly. Now she was correcting it formally. Each action contradicted the previous one. At 11:30 a.m., a formal notice was sent requiring her to attend a compliance interview the following week. She called me at 12:02 p.m. I answered. Mom, they're treating this like a legal issue, she said. It is, I replied. I just wanted to protect my image. I let that sentence sit between us. At 12:05 p.m., she said, You could fix this. How? I asked. Say you misunderstood. I didn't. Silence. At 1:18 p.m., her fiancé's father sent a message proposing a written reconciliation statement drafted by his attorney. It framed the situation as a generational misunderstanding. Daniel reviewed it and shook his head. It contradicts surveillance, he said. At 2:40 p.m., airport legal issued a final determination. The complaint against me was closed. The report against her was sustained as materially inaccurate. Referral to municipal review was noted but left discretionary. The document was clinical, detached. At 3:02 p.m., her fiancé canceled a public event appearance. At 3:16 p.m., a local donor board meeting was postponed. I learned these details later, not because I searched, but because they were circulated in quiet circles. At 4:05 p.m., my daughter sent a final message. I didn't think you'd fight back. I read it twice. I had not fought. I had simply not disappeared. That evening at 6:30 p.m., Daniel invited me to dinner in the residence dining hall. It was quiet. 2 tables occupied. You understand this was never about tickets, he said. I know. It was about distance, he added. Yes. At 7:18 p.m., he handed me a copy of the final report. Keep it, he said. On Friday, at 9 a.m., my daughter's compliance interview began. I was not present. At 10:42 a.m., Daniel received confirmation that she had acknowledged exaggeration under formal review. No admission of intent, but acknowledgement of inaccuracy. At 11:20 a.m., her fiancé's father emailed Daniel stating that the wedding would be postponed. The subject line read, "Timing considerations." By noon, social media posts had been removed. At 1:15 p.m., my daughter called again. This time her voice was quieter. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" I asked. "For making it official." That was the most honest thing she had said. At 2:10 p.m., I packed my carry-on again. Daniel walked me to the exit. "You don't owe anyone public forgiveness," he said. "I know." Outside, the sky was clear. At 3:05 p.m., I boarded a flight home. I paid for the ticket myself. As the plane lifted, I realized something important. Nothing had exploded. No dramatic confrontation. No revenge speech. Just documented steps. Consequences built from sequence, not emotion. The system had done what systems do when records align, and I had done what I needed to do. The aftermath did not happen in a single moment. It unfolded in missed meetings and altered schedules. On Monday at 8:15 a.m., I received an automated email confirming that the municipal review had issued a formal warning. No fines were listed. The language referenced first time reporting inaccuracies. I saved the PDF and closed the inbox. At 9:40 a.m., my daughter's fiancé's family foundation released a brief statement postponing their charity gala. It cited unforeseen administrative concerns. I did not search for it. A former colleague forwarded it to me without comment. At 10:05 a.m., my daughter texted asking if we could meet privately. I replied, "Not today." That was all. By Tuesday, the practical consequences were visible. At 8:32 a.m., her fiancé's father resigned from a committee position he had held for years. The resignation was framed as temporary. At 9:10 a.m., an internal memo circulated among donors regarding reputational diligence. Daniel did not call. He did not need to. At 11:45 a.m., my daughter emailed me a draft statement she had prepared. It described the airport incident as a miscommunication amplified by stress. She asked for my approval before releasing it. I did not respond. At 1 p.m., she withdrew the draft. The email system notified me that the message had been recalled. I kept the original copy. Wednesday brought a different kind of silence. No texts, no calls, only small adjustments rippling outward. At 9:18 a.m., the wedding venue announced the date would be rescheduled. At 10 a.m., a local event listing removed her name from a volunteer board. No explanation provided. At 2:14 p.m., she called again. I answered. "They think I manipulated the report," she said. "You did," I replied. "I was trying to protect myself." "From what?" She did not answer. At 3:30 p.m., she asked if I would speak to her fiancé's family and confirm that we had reconciled. I said no. Thursday morning, I went back to my routine. I visited the pharmacy at 10:12 a.m., paid for my prescription, and walked home carrying a small paper bag. The receipt printed with a timestamp. I folded it into my purse. At 12:05 p.m., my daughter sent a long message apologizing for her words at the airport. She did not mention the police report. She did not mention the social media post. I read it once. Then I placed the phone on the table and continued washing dishes. By Friday, the consequences had settled into structure. At 9 a.m., the compliance office closed its review with a notation. At 10:30 a.m., Daniel sent a brief email confirming no further action would be taken on my end. At 1:15 p.m., my daughter sent one final message that week. "I didn't think you'd let it go this far." I understood what she meant. She had expected me to step in, before the record solidified, to smooth it over, to absorb it. Instead, I had remained still. On Sunday afternoon at 4:20 p.m., I walked through a small park near my apartment. Families were sitting on benches. Children ran between trees. I sat down and checked the time on my watch. No messages, no alerts, just air moving through leaves. The collapse had not required force. It had come through canceled events, withdrawn statements, compliance interviews, and postponed celebrations. She had built her narrative quickly, but systems move slower, and once they begin, they rarely reverse. The last conversation happened on a Tuesday at 6:18 p.m. She asked if she could come by. I told her she could stop by for 10 minutes, no more. She arrived at 6:32 p.m. without her fiancé. No makeup, no presentation, just a plain sweater and tired eyes. She stood in my doorway for a moment before stepping inside. I had already poured 2 glasses of water. She did not sit immediately. I didn't think you would let it become official, she said. I nodded once. You reported me. I replied. I panicked. Yes. She looked around the apartment. It was smaller than the house she grew up in. The couch was older. The curtains were thin. I was trying to prove something, she said. I know. To them. Yes. At 6:40 p.m., she finally sat down. I'm sorry, she said again, this time without explanation attached. I didn't respond immediately. I watched the clock on the wall move 1 minute forward. Do you understand what you did? I asked. She nodded. You made a formal statement that could have followed me for years. She swallowed. I thought you'd deny it, and we'd move on. I didn't deny it, I said. She looked confused. I told the officers I was safe. I continued. I didn't accuse you. I didn't defend myself. I let the record speak. Silence stretched. At 6:47 p.m., she asked, Are you going to forgive me? I considered the question carefully. I'm not going to carry it, I said. That was the closest I came to an answer. She left at 6:51 p.m. The next morning at 9:05 a.m., I received confirmation that the municipal file had been closed with no further action required. The subject line read, Review complete. I archived it. Over the next few weeks, her wedding plans resurfaced quietly. A new date, a smaller venue, fewer announcements. She did not ask me to attend. I did not ask about it. One afternoon in early spring, I stood in line at a grocery store and saw her reflection in the freezer glass behind me. She was holding flowers. She looked older than she had 6 months before. Our eyes met briefly. I nodded. She nodded back. Neither of us approached. It was not anger. It was recognition. The physical change happened without ceremony. I replaced the worn blue carry-on I had dragged through O'Hare that night. The new suitcase was black, lighter, easier to maneuver. I threw the old one away without hesitation. I no longer checked departure boards anxiously. I no longer scanned crowds for exits. Life returned to its ordinary scale. Mornings with coffee at 7:10 a.m., laundry at 5:30 p.m., books on the kitchen table. Daniel sent one final message months later. Hope you're well. I replied, I am. We never discussed the airport again. Sometimes I think about Gate C19, about how small the moment looked from a distance. A canceled ticket, a removed wallet, a quiet accusation. It could have ended there. Instead, it became a sequence. Not because I fought, not because I shouted, but because I did not step in to erase what she had started. There was no public apology, no dramatic reconciliation, only a shift in how we understood each other. I do not tell this story to punish her. I tell it because silence is often mistaken for weakness. Sometimes it is simply restraint. And sometimes restraint is what allows consequences to unfold without interference. Life did not end at 6:44 p.m. in Chicago. It continued. That is enough. Got it. Here are 500 additional words, continuing naturally from the ending tone. Calm. Controlled. No melodrama. Just continuation. A month after that last conversation, she sent me a calendar invite. No message attached, just a date and a time. Sunday, 2 p.m. location, bridal fitting. I didn't accept it. I didn't decline it either. The notification expired on its own. Life returned to routine in measurable ways. At 7:05 a.m., my alarm rang. At 8:10 a.m., I walked to the corner bakery and bought bread. The same cashier nodded. I paid in cash. The receipt printed with a faint time stamp. On Wednesdays, I attended a book discussion group at the library. At 6:30 p.m., we sat around a wooden table and talked about novels that had nothing to do with airports or reports or public embarrassment. No one there knew what had happened. I preferred it that way. 3 weeks later, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a formal printed wedding invitation. Heavy paper, gold lettering, my name written correctly. No personal note. I placed it on the kitchen counter and made tea. At 4:42 p.m., I threw the envelope away and kept the card, not as a symbol, just as paper. The wedding happened in early autumn. I knew because social media made it impossible not to know. Photos surfaced, smaller venue, controlled guest list, comments carefully filtered. I did not look for them, but when one appeared on my screen accidentally, I did not scroll immediately. She looked composed. Older, yes, but composed. I noticed something small in the caption, grateful for second chances. It wasn't directed at me, but I understood it. Months passed. On a rainy Tuesday, at 3:18 p.m., she called unexpectedly. "I'm not asking for anything," she said. "I just wanted you to know I'm in counseling." I said, "That's good." There was no follow-up question, no emotional exchange. Before hanging up, she said something I hadn't expected. "When they started asking for documentation, I realized you had always kept records. Even when I was younger." She wasn't wrong. I kept report cards, medical receipts, school forms. I believed in paper trails long before airports were involved. "I learned that from you," she added quietly. We ended the call without resolution, just acknowledgement. The final shift happened on an ordinary afternoon. I was at the pharmacy again, the same one from before. At 10:11 a.m., the pharmacist handed me my medication and asked if everything was correct. "Yes," I said. As I walked home, I passed a travel agency window advertising winter flights. I paused, not because I was afraid, but because I was considering where I wanted to go next. The past no longer felt like something chasing me. It felt archived, filed, closed. That night at 9:30 p.m., I checked my bank balance out of habit. Everything was stable, ordinary, no hidden crises, no unexpected deductions, just numbers behaving as they should. I turned off the light and went to bed. The airport became a location. My daughter became an adult with consequences, and I became someone who no longer rushed to correct narratives written about her. Silence, when chosen, has a structure, and structure, when maintained, reshapes everything around it. Life did not return to what it was. It moved forward, quietly, and that is enough.